Greetings, shippers. It's time once again to remind ourselves that magic always comes with a price. And that price seems to be ships falling by the wayside left and right. We already did this for Season 1, so click the card if you missed it, but right now, let's dive into Season 2, where the pairings multiplied and even fewer survived. So let's take a look from the plausible to the unbelievable, because all ships are welcome here. Oh, Season 2, a complete shift of the status quo. The curse was broken, people remembered their alternate pre-curse lives, and the stage was set for intense personal drama, which is of course why several characters were instantly transported away to the Enchanted Forest. But oh, what a forest of ships and undertones. Season 2 also marked a shift towards the more blatant Disneyfication of the show in terms of not only characters used, but the backstories they were provided with. In some cases, subtlety got thrown out the window, and that only got worse as the show went on. However, at this point in the show's history, it was still pretty exciting to see who was going to pop up. And we got some of that excitement in Season 2 when we were introduced to Prince Philip, Princess Aurora, and Mulan, all three first appearing in the season premiere episode Broken. And while the show was clearly, at first at least, trying to push fans towards a love triangle between Prince Philip and Mulan and Prince Philip and Aurora, something else happened entirely. Our first dead ship, Sleeping Warrior, the pairing of Princess Aurora and Mulan. What was supposed to be played off as jealousy quickly became a case of UST, and it seemed like the two characters had a clear attraction to each other, but were too afraid to express it, due to their respective duties and promises, not to mention a sense of obligation to poor oblivious Philip. At times, it came to seem like the show was well aware of it as well, or so completely unaware they kept shoving it to the forefront. Your opinion may vary depending on how much one buys into the idea that the show likes to bait its viewers, which it clearly does, regardless of the pairing.
You think I'm interested in Hook? I'm a married man.
We were graced with scenes of Mulan returning Aurora's heart to her body in a shot that really wants to highlight that unseen penetration. And just overall the two growing in closeness to the point where it was easy to forget that Philip even existed. While Disney femslash is a huge phenomenon unto itself, Mulan and Aurora wasn't exactly a dominant ship, but seeing these two on the small screen made some really extrapolate as to what backstories could bring them together. Sheltered Aurora protected her whole life with the adventure-seeking Mulan. Aurora proving herself to be more than capable of standing up for herself, even if she wasn't always the best at it. And Mulan clearly wanting to protect her and keep traveling with her and do what's right. After these characters played their part in getting our protagonists back to Storybrooke, they weren't seen again for a while, and it was made clear they were off to finish their assigned Disney plot, getting Philip and Aurora back to the kingdom. However, it's in Season 3 when the ship truly died in canon. While at the same time, it was also paradoxically the moment where Mulan's feelings were made pretty clear.
You see, why are you smiling at me?
I can tell you were bursting with news, but so am I. Philip and I are expecting a baby.
Poor Mulan. She can't catch a break. Pregnant with somebody else's baby is a pretty clear stop sign. For most people anyway. Sleeping Warrior was a whimsy for some, a strong ship for others, but some were actually left angered because they felt that the show had shied away from queer representation and showing that true love comes in many forms. While some enjoyed these characters, others were more of the mindset that these aren't our main characters and I don't care. Put Hook and Regina back on the screen, which trust me, they were more than happy to oblige. The arrival of Hook signaled the beginning of a shift in the show, though at the time fans and writers didn't know it yet, as his popularity had yet to explode to the extent that it eventually would. However, if writers could have / did look at the amount of ships he instantly produced, they may have had an inkling of what was coming up. Next up, we have another pairing with Sleeping Beauty, but still not with your canon prince. It's Sleeping Hook. Back before Captain Swan took off as the ship, there were rivals. One was the pairing of Princess Aurora with the pirate captain, fueled in part by some bait-and-switch elements of their scenes, the fact that Hook literally took and saved her heart, and also the fact that both actors had previously worked together, sharing a romantic scene together while they were on the Tudors, a connection that fueled the minds of many shippers. There were numerous AUs of the two both coming to Storybrooke and having to find themselves, of Aurora being the only person capable of seeing Hook's good side, of the two being fed up with the roles they have to play, say. There were even some who wanted Aurora to be playing the dual role of Wendy in the Panverse, as Rumpelstiltskin had already proved a character could traverse multiple stories. Back in the day, there was actually a lot of drama surrounding this one. The shipping wars were real. However, this one, like most of the Captain's other ships, was lost in the wave that was Captain Swan, and also by the fact that Aurora did not make the jump to Storybrooke. Like Jefferson, it's hard to keep interest in a character alive if you never see them. Speaking of Jefferson, he got around quite a bit in pairing circles in this season, despite the fact that it marked his last on-screen appearance. Up next, we have Mad Queen, the pairing of Jefferson with the Evil Queen, in a ship of darkness and deceit. This is a pairing that's more possible with the Bitter Hatter than the My Daughter Is Back Hatter. It's a bit of a hard sell, what with Jefferson's history and his lost daughter and the horror he endured under the curse. But hey, who said all ships had to be light? There is also the flip side of the more innocent Regina with the full eyelinered Mad Hatter before he turned his life around. He could show her all the dimensions a well-made hat has to offer. Yes, he has a wife, but the show doesn't ever feel the need to give her screen time, so neither do fanfic authors. Except in passing, to have her fulfill the dead Disney mom's trope. Fun for those who like to see villains together, and they look good together. But who are we kidding? Those two would look good with anybody. Next, Mad Doctor, otherwise known as Mad Whale. Jefferson and Dr. Whale, or in this case, Frankenstein, as the two are showcased together in the episode appropriately titled The Doctor. Both characters are shown to be shady and out for their own ends, working in cahoots with Rumpelstiltskin, but there was also a roughness to their characters that led some to fantasize about a casual relationship between the two, especially given the science versus magic connection.
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
It burned hot and fast. The two were never seen together again, and Dr. Whale soon faded out of being a serious or oft-used character, soon regulated to jokes about being thrown against walls and being the town's only doctor, or having a lab that other characters could use. This episode also gave us Whale Queen, but in a more crack ship kind of way, like Hook and Jello, or is Jello his arch nemesis?
What the bloody hell is this?
Jello.
It's food. You eat it.
Oh, I thought it was an hallucination. Oh, hello. You're quite real, aren't you?
But this season had more for us than one pirate's love of surprisingly difficult to master dessert. It also gave us Regina going to therapy, which is honestly something that you would think most people in the town would be doing after the recent revelations. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, Archie is here to help Regina get in touch with herself. And you know what that means. It's shipping time. Introducing what is known to some as Regal Cricket. If you like inappropriate therapist-patient relationships, this is the ship for you. In all seriousness though, Archie sees a vulnerable side to Regina that few ever do, and while he is prone to get swept up in the town's mob mentality, he is more understanding than most, and looking to forgive. Plus, the two were involved in a murder mystery. Granted, it was did Regina kill him or not, but it was still more of a link between their characters. The idea of the two setting up a quiet life and Regina coming to know herself better and heal through the process was an appealing one for a small few. Side note, just pointing out, Archie's funeral was lovely. All that mourning and sadness, even though he wasn't dead. All things considered, it was a much grander affair than Graham's funeral. You know, that sheriff main character that died back in season 1, and we came back the next episode and it was 2 weeks later? Seems fair. Well, this Archie arc also brings us another ship, though for some it may have started in season 1. We're talking about Red Cricket, Ruby, and Archie. While he was arguing with Regina on the dock, Ruby came over to see if everything was okay, the act of a concerned citizen or true love. You decide. In all honesty, the two do have some things in common. They're both listeners who would go above and beyond to help their friends. Both have had to come to terms with certain truths about themselves and have a tendency to hold themselves a bit apart from others, even though they are more than welcome and are comfortable being part of a group. Ruby has come through most of her issues, but it is conceivable that she would like someone to talk to, and the simplicity and domesticity Archie offers seems to be in line with what she was originally seeking from her life. The fics for these two tend to be pretty sweet, and the AUs are really interesting. They're a surprisingly cute pair if you stop to think about it. However, the two don't interact that much. Not that that's a barrier. However, what is that they are both characters that writers tend to push into the background until they are needed. Both Archie and Ruby have vanished for full seasons at a time, and the explanation for Ruby's absence is still a point of contention for some. However, while she was still around and featured prominently, she was involved in another much bigger ship, that of Red Beauty, the pairing of Ruby and Belle. Following Belle's entrance into Storybook proper as her own character, she began what was at the time a new journey to define herself, and whether or not she wanted to continue her relationship with Rumpelstiltskin, her beast. During season 2, this resulted in her needing her own place to stay and her own job. Ruby was particularly helpful in these regards, appearing as a friend and a shoulder to lean on, and Belle was more than happy to return the favor. Ruby was someone to make her feel at home in Storybrooke and show her all of the town's local hotspot. Ruby seemed to provide Belle with the option of a stable relationship with someone who would just let her be herself, as bold or not bold as that happened to be, and Belle had proven herself adept at being able to see the good in people and help bring it out. Ruby still sometimes battled her wolf side and her guilt, and it's clearly not something Belle would flinch away from. There was also the pairing of the dark doppelganger of Belle, Lacey, and Ruby. When the amnesiac Belle entered her Lacey persona, who was a bad girl because she went out to the bar and played pool and liked violence, which was actually the only bad thing about her, the last part. It was a fun AU that some fans like to explore, the two of them together pre the curse being broken. What if Belle had been Lacey during the curse? Especially since Curse Ruby had a bad streak of her own. Two bad girls painting the town red. Well, as red as you can paint a town like Storybrooke. These two had a decent following for a while, but Belle is part of the far bigger Rump Belle ship, which has just become more and more convoluted as the show has gone on. And Ruby, as mentioned many times before, was not often around after season 2. So these two didn't share that many scenes together past a certain point, and their plot lines quickly diverged. This one still has a small following struggling to keep it alive, and some very interesting AUs, particularly involving Dark Red, which is always a treat. But let's also look back to some new players and take the time to introduce Neil, poor often forgotten Neil, who was later removed from the plot hard to make room for Hook and Emma's romance. Cause Lord forbid something emotionally complicated happened that couldn't be neatly resolved. Whether or not actors need to leave or want to leave, there are ways to handle their character exits, and Neil's is very much the easy way out. Neil first appeared as a mystery character and then later in a series of flashbacks with the 100% teenage Emma. She had a ponytail and glasses. That takes at least 15 years off you. Well, aside from the obvious Neil-Emma pairing, aka Swanfire, what with him being Henry's father and overall pretty charming, we had our non-main sub-pairings. For one, we must welcome back August for perhaps the best ship name on here, Firewood. Season 2 briefly presented viewers with a truly compelling mystery. Not only did it show that August and Neil had met before, but that August had manipulated Neil into leaving Emma by showing him something inside his mysterious box. So naturally, for weeks, the question was, what's in the box? As anticlimactic as the box reveal ended up being, some fans were drawn to the parallels between August and Neil, both cast-offs into a world without magic at a young age and forced to fend for themselves, both having developed slight chips on their shoulders as well as the necessary personalities and criminal skills to survive. Neither are great people at that point, but both would like to be better. While many imagined their liaison happening in the past, some felt it could be reignited should the two cross paths again, and others were happy to let the ship develop into an OT3 with Emma. That way Henry got to keep both his father figures, and Emma got to be with both men, who had a slightly odd childhood connection to her. It was actually a solid OT3, and the characters were shown to play well off each other, and it was nice to see Neil get some love. Poor Neil. He just never quite caught on with viewers as much as some of the other characters. And well, then he died. And he seems like he's going to stay dead. We were even given an I'm happy in heaven cameo, so Emma doesn't have to feel any guilt. So unless something changes in the future, it's unlikely Neil is about to return to Storybrooke. But knowing this show, you never know. But if that happens, the ships will be there. Season 2 was all about surprising reveals and expanding upon backstories, even more so now that the curse was broken. And one of those reveals was the relationship between Hook and Rumpelstiltskin. Just how did Rumple become the crocodile? Which brings us in a roundabout way to Captain Beauty, or Hooked Beauty. Poor Belle, a lot happened to her in season 2. A lot of it pretty traumatic. Kidnappings, memory loss, general emotional manipulation, bad parenting. Well, in episode 11, she found herself kidnapped by Hook and held captive on the Jolly Roger, with the sole purpose of having to listen to Hook be as seductive as possible while he revealed his backstory.
If a woman comes to you and begs you to take her away, is that theft?
Hook originally had a very sultry, seductive quality to his character that was regularly used on most female characters he encountered, which resulted in a lot of pairings. There's just a lot of UST in these sequences that allows you to easily imagine them going in a much different direction. He's already halfway to Belle's heart, but with holding her captive and being a dangerous bad boy, back when Hook was actually allowed to be even mildly dangerous. However, aside from this scene, the two actually had some good moments, and over the seasons developed a tentative friendship that is still on display and keeps the ship, if not fully alive, then at least afloat. With Belle's understanding nature and Hook's slowly emerging potentially more gray areas, the two running off together was an interesting AU concept, especially as it would have been a good parallel to the first situation between Hook and Rumple. And during early season 2, there was many a what if Hook had been in Storybrooke during the curse fic to be found. Killian and Lacey, there's a fun one too. However, there are some obstacles, such as, well, his attempts to kill her, rarely a good start to any relationship, and this was going on even before the curse. I just low-key ship it because Rumple would have died. These two could work, it would just take some tweaking and some exploring. All of these ships could do with a full analysis, but alas, we must move on to, you guessed it, even more Hook. This time we have Hooked Queen, the pairing of the evil queen and Captain Hook. Hook meets the evil queen under charged circumstances and wearing some of her hotter outfits, which is saying something. The two are caught in a web of conspiracy, bent on furthering their own ends, bonding together over their respective complicated relationships with Cora and Rumpelstiltskin. The queen had already been shown to use men to her advantage, and this was the season of dark, intriguing pairings, fueled by the sex appeal of the actors portraying them. The idea of these two reconnecting and the potential derailment of Regina's quest for good and a slide back into a life of vengeance was intriguing. Both of these characters could represent a temptation to the other, even on just a narrative level. Perhaps for some, they just simply get fed up with being told that they're evil all the time. But, of course, Regina was already on a path for redemption, and as the seasons progressed, writers focused more and more on that for her and on Hook's relationship with Emma for him. Poor Hook. The fandom bicycle canon doesn't want you to ride. Hook was, of course, also paired with Cora, aka the Queen of Hearts, but that pairing is very similar, except you get to add the cougar element and probably a lot more manipulation. I mean, just what did they do together all that time in the wasteland of the Enchanted Forest? Now, we're nowhere near done, but it looks like this is going to have to be broken up so that all these crazy ships can have their day, as well as the ones just kind of floating without a defined starting point. But before we close out this episode, let's remember one of the fallen, Billy/Gus. Come on, you remember Billy? He was sort of around in season 1, a face in the crowd, a filler line in the script. Well, in the episode Child of the Moon, he asked out Red. They were going to bond over him remembering that he was one of the mice from Cinderella. Well, being brought into the forefront proved fatal, and Gus didn't live long enough to go on his date. Not that she'd agreed anyway, as this episode also had a strong Red beauty moment as it's Belle who steps in to say that they have a girls' night and that's why Ruby can't go out with him. Oh, Gus. He sacrificed himself for Ruby's character development. Well, for some fans, they remembered these two's interactions with each other in their cursed state, and with Gus briefly being highlighted, they wondered if they could have had something. Gus seems sweet, and Ruby post-curse was a more kind-hearted, mellow person. And of course, Once Upon a Time did often focus on romance as a subplot. Most of the time. However, obviously, this ship died with Gus. R.I.P. Gus. You sure were mentioned. So those were some dead/forgotten ships from season 2, lost to the ever onward march of new seasons, characters, and ridiculous plot twists. Are there any missing? If so, don't worry. Before season 3, we're gonna have to do some honorable mentions. Although honorable may not be the right word. On the whole, season 2 of Once is actually a pretty good one. It had high stakes, death still meant something, and it introduced new characters who had time to be a bit more fleshed out and weren't clear marketing tie-ins. Season 4, I'm never gonna forgive you. It also provided some solid character development for our leads, and they actually were progressing as characters. Something that sadly became harder and harder to pull off as the series went on, but we'll get to that later. If you feel any of these pairings deserve a full analysis, let me know in the comments below or on Twitter at Shipper's Guide. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and of course stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.